I learned a very important lesson the other day, and that is sometimes it's not always the best thing for your photo software to be a jack of all trades. In some situations, it makes more sense to use software that is specifically tuned for a particular task. In this video, I'm going to show you what I mean by that. What's going on, everyone? Brian Matias, welcome to the video. So here's basically what happened. A few weeks ago, I made the decision to move from Adobe Lightroom Cloud, new Lightroom, over to Lightroom Classic. And if you want, you can check out the video. I did a live video with Rob Sylvan where we went into painful detail about what's involved with that. But as part of the process, before I made the migration, I went on this binge of purging old photos that I just didn't need. I knew I'd never want. In that process, though, I found a bunch of photos that I completely forgot about. I must have not ever done anything with them, or I just got busy with other shoots and other tasks, and I wanted to edit them. So I did, and in the process, I realized that certain things that I needed to apply, certain tasks like noise reduction and sharpening using Lightroom or Camera Raw, I tried both, they just failed. They didn't live up to what I needed, and they ended up actually making the images look worse. So I talked with a buddy of mine, Matt Klaskowski, who's an awesome photographer and even better photo educator. And he was telling me how much he relies on two products for noise reduction and sharpening. And both of them are by Topaz Labs. One of them is called DeNoise AI and the other one is Sharpen AI. And so that really piqued my interest. I never really considered using an application that was custom built for a specific task as part of my workflow. Most of the times in the past few years, I've just been using the tools that were available to me in Lightroom and in Photoshop. And what I realized after using these products is that I was able to identify certain characteristics in the photos that would most benefit from using either DeNoise or Sharpen AI. So let me tell you what I mean by that. I'm in Lightroom over here, as you can see, and here are some photos that I took. And like I said, there are certain use cases where I found using DeNoise AI and Sharpen AI to really kind of save the photos that would otherwise probably be lost. They just wouldn't be worth sharing. So here's what I mean. Here I've got two different photos. This one I took in 2017, October. This one is even older, in 2013, and then mobile photos. And that's what I'm going to get to in a minute. But I feel like these two applications are amazing when you pair them with mobile photos. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's start with this photo here. So like I said, I was going through older photos and I completely forgot that I took these photos. Here's a kind of a wildlife photo, something I don't do very often. And part of the reason is because I don't have the longest lenses necessarily, or the cameras with the fastest burst modes. But still, this was taken, I was at a really long distance. You can see here that this was with a Sony A9 and the 100 to 400 millimeter with a teleconverter. And if I bring up the information here, it was the 2-time teleconverter. And I was at 400 millimeters with the 2-time teleconverter. I was at 800 millimeters. Now, if I zoom in, I can see there's a little bit of artifacting and some noise already happening, and we haven't even touched the photo yet. So let's do that. I'm going to go ahead and go to the develop module. Let's just fix the photo really quickly. First, obviously we need to rotate so that the horizon is level. That's looking pretty good right around there. But the other thing is that this is still way too far. Even at 800 millimeters, it's just too far. I want to be closer. So we'll go back to the crop mode and I'm going to really tighten the composition. So now you can really see the just kind of how much noise there is. On top of that, let's go ahead and fix it as far as the exposure. You can see that this is kind of underexposed. If I look at the information in the metadata, it was at ISO 8000, 1/125th of a second at f11. So that's kind of what I used to get the shot, to get the animal over here sharp, and it is sharp. Thankfully, it's not soft. But we'll go ahead. Let's bring out the white point a little bit. Let's open up the exposure. Let's open up the black point just so that we're not necessarily blowing out highlights or clipping shadows. And so you can see here, I mean, there's a ton of noise. It's not very good in my opinion. Let me add a little bit of contrast. I'm going to darken it just a tiny bit. All right, so there you go. Actually, I'm also going to warm it there. Now, if I were in Lightroom, I'd go down here to under the detail panel to the noise reduction here, and I would start trying to add some noise reduction. And you really don't start to see that effect until you get way up here, where it kind of makes it mushy. It's really, really weird. You also lose all the detail in the fur, and up here, it's just not very good. Same thing with color noise reduction. If I try to remove some of that, it's a little bit better, but you still start to lose a lot of detail, and you still have a bunch of noise. So this is why I reached out to my buddy Matt, because he does a lot of wildlife photography, and I wanted to ask him what he does to kind of mitigate this. And this is how, this whole conversation of using Topaz, DeNoise, and Sharpen came up. So let's go ahead here. The photo is kind of at the place where it's fine. I'm going to go ahead and right click. We're going to send it to Photoshop. And the first thing I'm going to do is just duplicate this layer just so that we have the original. You do that by hitting Command or Control J. And then let's rename this to Topaz DeNoise AI. Now I'm not going to do anything else. I'm just going to send it into Topaz. I'll go to Filter, Topaz Labs, and then go to Topaz DeNoise AI. Now in DeNoise, there are 3 primary settings for the AI mode. There's DeNoise AI, AI Clear, and Low Light. The way that I like to use DeNoise and Sharpen is there's a slick view here. It's kind of like a 4-up view called Comparison View. When I click it, it shows me all 3 modes with the original up here in the top left quadrant. And I can see, okay, this is the DeNoise AI mode, this is the AI Clear mode, and this is the Low Light mode. And I can kind of move around if I want to reposition to get a better view. And between the 3 here, I actually like this AI Clear. It looks the best. So I'm going to go ahead and return to the single view and click on AI Clear. And you can see it really is very impressive just how much of an improvement there is. If I press and hold, you can see this is the original without any edits. And if I let go, that's what with the AI enhancements with noise reduction. So the thing that I love most is that it retains a lot of the detail, especially here in the fur, that was lost when I was using Lightroom's noise reduction. And so with just a few clicks, I was able to get a really good result without losing any of that important detail. So I'm going to go ahead and click Apply to return back to Photoshop. And if I toggle, here is that denoise layer. This is the original one. And just for comparison, I'm going to go ahead to this original background layer. We'll do another duplicate layer. I'll put it on top over here. We'll rename this one ACR NR for Adobe Camera Raw Noise Reduction. And I'm going to go to Filter, and we're going to go to Camera Raw Filter. And this is effectively the develop module that you'd find in Lightroom, but in Photoshop. So let's go ahead. We'll go to Detail. And again, just like before, let's go ahead and add some noise reduction and, kind of slowly start to see when we get some of that noise removed, which is, I guess, right around here, we're starting to get it, but it's introducing even more artifacting. Even if I increase some of that detail to restore some of that detail, it's still kind of mushy throughout the fur over here, and also over here in the foreground, it's all very mushy. And again, even if I turn this off and try with color noise reduction, not really seeing much of a difference here. So noise reduction is what we're going to use. Try to get rid of that noise, try to mitigate it, add some detail, and also a little bit of contrast. And that's about as good as we're going to get if I kind of toggle. It is removing the noise, but I'm also losing all of that detail. So let's click OK over here. And now we'll turn on the Topaz denoise layer just to compare the 2. So you can see, one, the noise reduction is much cleaner in the background. But the other thing is, look over here in the fur, the detail of the fur is much crisper. And then also look in the background here where the noise culprit was. You can still see there's still plenty of that noise. It's just kind of smudged. Whereas here, the noise is actually mitigated to the point where it looks realistic. It looks like I haven't lost any detail, and that is what's really impressive to me. And that's basically what reinforced to me why it's important to consider using an application that is custom built for a specific purpose, as opposed to just using this, for instance, in this case, the noise reduction as part of a much larger set of tools. By using something like DeNoise AI, it just solves the problem much more effectively. All right, now let's go back to Lightroom over here. And here, this is a different photo. Again, this was taken in 2013 with an old Canon 5D Mark III. and a 500mm prime lens. So I'm going to go in here. Again, it's one of those photos where I don't know, I just seeing other people do wildlife photography, I'm starting to get that bug a little bit. And I just want to see if I have anything that I've taken in the past and whether I can salvage any of it. Now, this photo, for the most part, it's obviously underexposed. So let's go ahead, we'll fix it. We'll go to the develop module, and you can even see in the histogram, there's plenty of room to play with. So we will open up the exposure. Let's bring that white point out. Let's open up the black point, open up the shadows, and we'll add just a little bit of contrast. I'm also going to warm it just a tiny bit. And so that's looking better. And if I zoom in, here's the problem. And let me go ahead, I'll zoom in a little bit more. You can see that it's just a little soft. Either I didn't get the right focus or there's just a little bit of motion blur, but the point is that it's not critically sharp, and that's a problem. And so again, I thought, all right, let me try the sharpening in Lightroom. So I went down to the detail panel, and again, we went to sharpening, and let's put the target right here on the eye. And I'm going to press and hold the Option key, and I'm going to try to get it sharp, but it just doesn't look very good. Even if I adjust the radius and the detail of the sharpening and remove it from the rest of the scene, it looks overly crispy. It doesn't look like it's sharpened properly. So let's go ahead. If I turn that off, you can see what it does. It's not good. It actually introduces a bunch of noise as well. So let's go ahead. We'll remove the sharpening. I'm also going to go and crop, because that's the other thing, is I wanted this photo to be a little bit tighter on the bird. So right around here, see if that's good. There. Okay. So that's looking good, but if we zoom in, we're still not fully sharp. So let's right click, we'll send it to Photoshop just like before. And I'm going to go ahead and duplicate that layer. Again, Command or Control J. Let's rename this one to Topaz Sharpen AI. And we'll go ahead and let's invoke it. So we'll go to Filter, Topaz Labs, and Topaz Sharpen AI. And even if I don't do anything, just with this default view, if I press and hold, that's the original. I'm looking at the eye over here, and I can see just how much detail is brought in. But I'm going to go ahead, like before in DeNoise AI, I'm going to go to that comparison view. And between the three, I like the out of focus, but it's a bit overly sharpened. The motion blur is kind of that Goldilocks. It brings back enough of that detail without introducing any artifacts. So let's go to View and then Single View. And again, if I press and hold, you can see how that detail snaps back in. Now remember, this is a photo that I took in 2013 that I already heavily cropped. So to be able to recover any detail without introducing, any artifacting or noise, that's a win for me. And that's one of those things where, again, it's important to pair partly your expectations, but also the reality of the situation. It's a really old photo taken with a really old camera, and I'm trying to recover, one, some information from it being underexposed, and two, for it being heavily cropped. So I'm happy with this. I'll go ahead and click apply. And if we toggle the layers, you can see, just look at the eyes. I'll go ahead and zoom in, and let's just kind of toggle. Look at the way the detail gets snapped back in. Now, just like before, I'm going to go turn this layer off, and let's duplicate this layer. We'll rename this one ACR Sharpening and put it up above. Let's go to Filter, Camera Raw Filter, and we'll go to the sharpening tool over here. Let's add some sharpening. Somewhere right around there is looking good. Let's remove some of that from the area that we don't want. And I'm pressing holding the Option key or the Alt key to show me that mask. Then let's also add a little bit more of a radius to the sharpening, as well as a little bit of detail. And so I can see it's sharper, but it also brings in this weird noise. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK here, and let's see the difference between ACR and Topaz Sharpen. So you can see, let's go ahead. I'll zoom in just a bit. So this is the ACR sharpening, and that's the Topaz sharpening. Do you see how it just gets rid of all that really nasty noise that was introduced? And it gives you this nice, clear It's sharper because here's the original. This is just with ACR. It just brings in a lot of that noise. But with Sharpen AI, it just kind of snaps that detail. And that's, again, pairing the application that is purpose driven. This is meant for sharpening soft or blurry photos. It just works a lot better in my opinion. Now, before we move on to the next series of photos, I want to tell you about a special discount that Topaz has given me to offer. If you're interested in buying either of these products or all of their products, click the link in the description below and use code Matiash15 to save 15% off your purchase. Even if the products are already on sale, you'll still get 15% off. Now, it's worth noting that Topaz provided me with review copies of both of these applications, and I appreciate that, but this is not a paid or sponsored video. They do not get to watch this video before you guys do. They have no input on it. They're seeing it the same time you guys are. I was just really impressed with these applications, and I wanted to share with you how I use them and how I think they can benefit you. So again, link in the description, use code Matiash15 to save 15% off. Now here's where I found DeNoise AI and Sharpen AI to really shine, and that's with my mobile photography. Now listen, I actually love shooting with my iPhone. I'm so impressed with the quality of photos that it produces, but depending on the situation, especially if it's not ideal lighting conditions, the results can be less than stellar. And I thought, hey, let's try pairing DeNoise and Sharpen AI with my mobile photos. So that's what we're going to do right now. Here's a photo that I took again with my iPhone 12. And if we go to the develop module, it's straight out of camera. There are no edits to it. But if I zoom in, you can see that there is plenty of noise in the background. So first thing I'm going to do, let's just kind of warm the photo up a little bit. All I'm doing is just kind of massaging it a bit. I'm going to open up the exposure, bring out that white point, not too much, add some highlights, and just make sure that we're not clipping the shadows too much. So that's looking good. Let's also go ahead and crop and just straighten that horizon. All right, so with that, we still got that noise. And just like before, if we use the noise reduction in Lightroom, basically what it does is it starts to smush everything. You lose all of the detail around the edges. It's just not very good. Yes, it does get rid of the noise, or at least it kind of mitigates it, but all of those edges get really mushy and just looks like you added a lot of noise reduction. So let's turn that off and we'll go and send this to Photoshop. And let's go ahead and create a layer here. We'll call this Topaz DeNoise AI. And we'll send it to DeNoise by going to the filter menu and then going to DeNoise. And just looking really quickly between these modes, the DeNoise AI looks really good. So let's just see, we'll go back to the single view. And if I press and hold, one of the things I really like is that it actually brought out some detail in the foreground. If I show you the original, which I'm showing you right here, it looks kind of soft, but that detail snaps back in. Let's go ahead, we'll go to a 100% view and we'll go up here to the background. And it looks pretty good. I could definitely see a difference, but let's just see. I think AI Clear looks better, and it does. I still have the detail along the edges, but it does a better job of removing that noise. I can also, if it's too much of that noise reduction, I can click on the low mode. But the more I look at it, I actually like the denoise option over here. It just looks more natural. It got rid of a lot of that noise, but it has more detail in the background. Same thing if I go here to the foreground. It removes enough of that noise, but it still retains a lot of that detail, especially in the tree here. You can see how that tree looks kind of soft, but afterwards it adds a little bit of sharpness, which is really nice. And so let's go ahead and click apply, and just toggling the denoise layer with the original. It does a really nice job of mitigating that noise without mushing out the details. And that's what I'm looking for, especially with these mobile photos, which are 12 megapixel photos, not the best in terms of low light performance. So again, being able to use a purpose-driven app for a specific use case has its benefits. And now let's go to the final image here. This was a photo that I took a few months ago during the winter. After all of the leaves obviously fell, we would get this frost, and I just love these kinds of photos. But if I zoom in, you can see how it's just not very sharp, and it should be. I mean, this was taken 1/200th of a second at a fixed aperture, but should definitely be sharp. And so again, this is where pairing purpose-driven apps for a specific use case will benefit big time. Let's go ahead. I'll go to the develop module over here. And there's really not that much that I need to do to the photo. I might go ahead and drop the exposure just a little bit, open up the highlights, the white point a little bit, and open up the shadows. So that's looking good here. I'm also going to warm it up just a tiny bit. Now let's go ahead and we'll send it to Photoshop, and let's duplicate that layer. We'll rename it Topaz Sharpen AI, and we'll send it to Sharpen AI. So right off the bat, without doing anything, if I just press and hold, you can see the details, the way they snap in. Like I'm looking over here. The details are brought back without it being overly sharpened, like we saw in that previous example of the bird. If you add too much sharpening using Lightroom or Camera Raw, it'll actually introduce these artifacts and noise. Here, I'm getting that information, the sharpened details, without actually having that artifacting. It looks really, really good. But we'll go ahead and go to our comparison view. And actually between these three modes, the out of focus mode looks really, really good. So back to single view, and I'm going to click on out of focus, and just seeing the difference, the way the details kind of snap into place, we'll go, let's fit the image to view, and just toggling, I can see just all the details, especially in the center here, the way they snap into place. It's kind of soft over here. It almost looks like it's out of focus, but with the sharpening effect put in, it just looks great. And again, pairing a purpose-driven app for a specific use case, in this case, it's a mobile photo, even with 12 megapixels and it's not cropped, just wasn't really critically sharp. So having that little extra nudge really adds to the quality of the photo. So I hope this gave you something to think about. It doesn't only have to be with noise reduction and sharpening, for example. I think it's important to figure out, based on the specific tools or the utilities that you need, whether what you have is most effective or if there's something else that is even better. In my case, I am actually very impressed with how Topaz DeNoise and Sharpen AI for their specific purposes performed with these photos, some of which are almost 10 years old, or taken with a mobile phone and a tiny camera sensor. Again, if you're interested in getting Topaz DeNoise AI or Sharpen AI for yourselves, click the link in the description below and use code Matiash15 to save 15% off your order, even if the products are already on sale. And to continue your video watching journey, just click right over here. That is the live video I did with Rob Sylvan. We go into all kinds of detail of what's involved if you want to move from the newer Lightroom back to Lightroom Classic. And with that, I'll see you on the next video. Thanks a lot.